A brave young nurse gets stabbed 5 times while protecting a veteran's special dog. Just 24 hours later, 200 tough Navy SEALs show up to support her. It all started on a chilly Tuesday evening in Los Angeles. Mia had just finished her long shift at the hospital. She was super hungry, and her whole body hurt from standing for 12 hours. Without thinking much, she walked down a side street to a little diner she had been to before. It was close to the hospital, a simple spot with hot coffee and easy food. She pushed open the door, and the bell above it jingled. Warm air hit her face. She smelled fresh coffee and grilled sandwiches, then picked a booth by the window, dropped her bag next to her, took a deep breath, and tried to relax. A waitress came over. Mia ordered coffee right away, and then a sandwich as a quick thought. While she waited, her eyes looked around the room. That's when she saw him, an older man at the counter. His back was a bit bent, his shoulders wide, but slouched. His hair was gray, his face had deep lines. At his feet was a canine service dog, with a faded vest that you could still tell what it was. She watched him for a bit. He didn't talk much to anyone, just sipped his coffee, and sometimes patted the dog's head. The dog stayed close, eyes alert but calm. Something about them reminded her of her dad, his quiet strength, carrying the weight of the past in every move. Mia's coffee came. She sipped it slowly, watching the steam rise. For the first time that day, she felt safe enough to let her mind drift. She hardly noticed the bell ring again. 2 men walked in. They were loud right away, laughing at some joke that didn't sound funny. Mia didn't pay them much attention until they sat too close to the veteran. She saw the older man get stiff, his fingers tight around the coffee mug. Then she heard the words, "Hey, check out the mutt." One of them snorted, "But it's too old to do anything now." His friend snickered. "Look at the old man trying to look tough with the dog. Probably pisses himself at night." Mia's grip on her cup got tighter. She looked right at them, hoping they'd stop, but they kept going. "Hey, old man, does the dog even bark? Or is it just as useless as you?" The veteran didn't answer. He kept his eyes on the counter, jaw tight. "What?" The dog whined, pressing closer to him. Mia had enough. "What?" She spoke clearly, not hiding her anger. "Leave him alone." In the air, talks in the diner slowed, then stopped. One of the men turned to her, his lip curling. "You heard me," Mia said. "Stop. He hasn't done anything to you." He stared at her, eyes narrowing. His friend shifted in his seat, cracking his knuckles. "This doesn't concern you," the first one said slowly. "It does now," Mia said. She kept her voice even but firm. They didn't respond right away. For a moment, no one moved. Then the man slammed his hand on the table, making the plates rattle. He stood up, pushing the chair back with a loud scrape. "Come on," he muttered to his friend. "Let's go." But before leaving, he paused next to her booth. He leaned down, voice low. "You'll regret that," he said. His eyes were flat and cold. She didn't respond. She met his stare until he finally straightened and walked out. The bell over the door rang sharply as they disappeared into the night. The silence in the diner was heavy. People slowly started eating again, but no one spoke to Mia. The veteran turned to look at her, eyes shining with something, like gratitude but also shame. "Thank you," he said quietly. She nodded. "Don't worry about it." The waitress refilled Mia's coffee. She tried to finish her sandwich, but her stomach was tight. She forced herself to take a few bites. The room felt smaller, the warm air suddenly stuffy. She just wanted to be done. She paid the bill, leaving a tip on the table. As she grabbed her bag, she saw the veteran slide off the stool. He moved slowly, careful with his steps. The dog stayed right by his side. "Heading out?" she asked. He nodded. "Mind if I walk you to the door?" He hesitated, then nodded again. They stepped outside together. The night air was biting, cold enough to make Mia shiver. The veteran pulled his coat tighter. The dog pressed close to his leg, eyes flicking around the dark street. They made it a few steps from the diner door when Mia noticed them. The 2 men were leaning against the wall by the alley, half hidden in shadow. She stopped. The veteran stopped beside her, confusion and fear showing on his face. The men straightened. Well, well, one of them said. Look who decided to come out. Mia's heart pounded. She shifted slightly, putting herself between the veteran and the men. Just go, she said. Leave him alone. Still running your mouth, the others sneered. He stepped forward. Don't, Mia warned. But they weren't listening. One of them pulled something from his pocket. The blade caught the streetlight for an instant. Mia didn't think. She pushed the veteran behind her, the dog barking wildly. Run, she hissed over her shoulder, but it was too late. The first man lunged. Mia tried to dodge, but pain exploded in her side. She felt the blade go in once, twice, 3 times. She gasped, grabbing at the wound, trying to hold herself together. The veteran shouted. The dog lunged at the attacker, teeth bared, but was kicked away. Mia tried to stand her ground, but another stab drove her to her knees. She hit the pavement hard, her vision blurred. She heard the old man screaming her name. The dog's barking was frantic. The attackers fled when headlights swung around the corner, someone yelling for help. Tires screeched as a car pulled over. Mia felt hands on her, heard someone say, "Stay." With me, but it sounded far away. She tried to speak, but blood bubbled in her mouth. She thought about the veteran, the dog, her father. Everything went dark. It was chaos the moment the ambulance doors flew open. Paramedics shouted vitals as they wheeled Mia through the emergency entrance. Her blood-soaked scrubs stuck to her skin. The gurney rattled over the tiled floor. Bright overhead lights seemed too harsh, slicing through the tense, heavy air. She was unconscious, her face pale and clammy, blood leaking through the compresses pressed to her wounds. 5 stab wounds, abdomen and flank. One paramedic barked, "BP's crashing, we're losing her." A team of nurses and doctors scrambled for lines were jammed into her arms. Oxygen was forced over her mouth and nose. The charge nurse shouted orders to clear a path to the trauma bay. Her clothes were cut away in rough, efficient motions, revealing ugly gashes, some still pulsing blood with every faint heartbeat. Get me on egg now. The trauma surgeon snapped, already gloved and ready. Mia didn't hear any of it. She was lost in the void, drifting deeper. The veteran had followed as far as security would allow, shouting her name hoarsely. When they stopped, he pressed against the glass doors of the ER, hands splayed, eyes wide in terror. His canine service dog sat beside him, whining in confusion and distress, refusing to move away. Inside, nurses who had worked countless shifts with Mia fought to keep steady. She was one of their own. A young nurse named Angela held the blood bag, up, trying not to shake. Another friend, Sam, helped keep Mia's airway clear, biting back tears. "Come on, Mia, stay with us," someone whispered. Outside the operating room, the veteran paced relentlessly. He wore a dazed expression, his mind replaying the attack in a loop. He hadn't been able to stop it. Every scream, every bark from his dog, every flicker of the blade haunted him. Dog, trained for war, but helpless here, refused to leave the veteran's side. It whined constantly, occasionally letting out a single sharp bark, as if demanding to be let in. Staff tried to comfort the old man, but he shook them off. He couldn't sit. He couldn't speak. He just paced and waited. Inside the OR, surgeons worked under searing bright lights. The room was filled with the smell of blood and antiseptic. One nurse mopped sweat from the surgeon's brow. The monitor beeped in frantic, uneven rhythms. "She's bleeding out. Suction clamp here. I need better exposure." "She's going into shock." The lead surgeon paused, stared at the gaping wound, and made a call. "Pack it. We're running out of time." Fell for a moment as everyone braced for the next crisis. Word spread through the hospital like wildfire. Mia's co-workers gathered outside the OR doors, scrubs stained from their own shifts, faces drawn tight with worry. Angela sat against the wall, knees to her chest. She was shaking. "Oh no, la 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 la." Sam stood beside her, one hand on her shoulder. Neither spoke. Neither could look away from the door. Another nurse, Linda, arrived after finishing in pediatrics. She didn't know the details yet. What happened? They stabbed her, Sam said flatly. Jesus. Linda dropped to the floor next to Angela and took her hand. The hours dragged inside. The surgeons moved between hope and despair. Every artery tied off. Every bleeding vessel sealed. Felt like a small victory. But new bleeders would open. Her blood pressure hovered just high enough to keep her alive, but too low to guarantee anything. BP's dropping again. Hang more blood. Outside, the Veterans Club began arriving one by one. Older men in battered leather jackets, caps with unit insignias, men who knew the weight of violence and helplessness. They didn't try to comfort the veteran. They simply stood with him. The service dog, still refusing to leave, settled at his master's feet, but kept looking at the doors, ears pricked, body tense. Mia's friends took turns updating them as best they could. She's fighting. She's in surgery. She's still alive. In the family waiting room, no one slept. Coffee sat untouched, cold in paper cups. A security guard stood by quietly, letting the group stay past visiting hours. Doctors would emerge with updates, faces solemn. She's lost a lot of blood. We've controlled the major bleeds for now. She's not out of danger. It's time the room would fall silent. The veteran would lean against the wall, eyes closed, muttering prayers no one else could hear. Staff who weren't even on shift arrived to sit vigil. The hospital was a family in its own rough way, and Mia was one of them. Meanwhile, the ore lights burned. Surgeons leaned over her exhaustion in their spines. Nurses swapped shifts but refused to leave her side. Instruments clattered into trays. Suction roared. Beeping monitors warned them constantly that the margin between life and death was razor thin. They kept going. One doctor finally leaned back and said, "Okay, that's the best we can do for now. Let's get her to ICU." She was wheeled out, pale as paper, covered in dressings and tubes. Machines beeped and hissed, doing the work her body couldn't. As she passed through the halls, staff stepped back, watching in solemn silence. Angela and Sam followed at a distance, wiping their eyes with their sleeves. The veteran pushed forward when he saw her, stopped only by the ICU doors, pressed a hand to the glass as they wheeled her in. The dog let out a long, low whine. Inside, the ICU nurses connected her to new monitors. The ventilator clicked. Lines dripped blood and fluid into her veins. Her heartbeat was there, thin, uncertain, but there. Doctors took turns checking the monitors, conferring quietly. She might make it. Someone finally whispered, "God, I hope so." Outside, the Veterans Club stayed. More men arrived as word spread. They settled in chairs against walls on the floor, refusing to leave. The veteran didn't move from his spot. His dog eventually curled at his feet and dozed, exhausted. Morning came and went, then afternoon, then evening again. Mia didn't wake, but her heart kept beating. Every time her vitals dipped, the team was there adjusting meds, hanging more blood, checking her pupils. Another 12 hours passed. Angela and Sam took shifts sitting with her, reading out her favorite things. They reminded her of funny cases from work. How she'd once spilled coffee all over her scrubs before a shift. How she never got anyone's name. Wrong. They didn't know if she could hear them, but they talked anyway. At 24 hours, her vitals began to steady. The lead surgeon came by, checked her over, and finally allowed himself to breathe. "Looks like she wants to stay," he said. He turned to Angela and Sam. "Keep talking to her. She deserves every chance." Outside, the veteran slumped into a chair for the first time in hours. He rested his head in his hands. The dog lay against. His legs, eyes half closed but alert. They weren't going anywhere. Not until they knew she'd made it. It was still dark when the first headlights appeared on the hospital access road, cutting thin beams through the lingering night mist. The parking lot was nearly empty, except for a few nurses arriving for early shifts and a couple of orderlies sneaking a cigarette in the cold. They squinted at the oncoming cars, puzzled by the slow, deliberate way they rolled in. By the time dawn's first pale light cracked the horizon, more vehicles had arrived. Dark sedans, battered pickup trucks, big turning motorcycles that growled before cutting silent. The hospital's security guard watched wearily, hand on his radio, but he didn't move to stop them. Men and women got out, some in uniform with trident, pins gleaming under headlights, others in jeans and old leather jackets with unit patches faded from sun and time. They stood in silence, gathering in small knots, greeting one another with nods, tight grips on shoulders. No one laughed. No one smoked. Inside the hospital, the night staff, preparing to sign off, glanced out the windows and froze. "It's who the hell are they?" asked an intern, peering through blinds. "Don't know," muttered a nurse beside him. "But look at them. Something's going on." By 6 a.m., the lot was full. Nearly 200 men and women, some active duty, hair cropped short, eyes scanning. For threats out of habit, others older, gray at the temples with the easy weight of experience in their posture. Every one of them was a SEAL. Word had spread like wildfire overnight. They'd heard about the nurse who'd stepped in front of a knife for an old man's canine. Not just any dog, but a retired military working dog who had saved lives downrange, who had served with them. The news passed through group chats, phone calls, the whispered network of old teammates. "Did you hear a nurse protected him? Stabbed 5 times? She's in surgery." They'd come. Some had driven all night. Others had called out from work without bothering to explain. Few hadn't worn the uniform in years, but pulled it from the closet anyway. No one told them to come. They just did. Inside the ICU waiting area, the veteran sat in a plastic chair he hadn't left in hours. He was hunched forward, elbows on his knees, the dog's head resting on his boot. The dog refused to leave his side, brown eyes glancing anxiously at every noise, ears flicking. The old man lifted his gaze and blinked as dawn lit up the hall. His eyes were red, raw with sleeplessness and grief. A nurse gently touched his arm. "They're here," she whispered. "Who?" She gestured toward the glass doors. He turned and squinted. Even from here, he could see them. Rows and rows of men standing at parade rest, arms folded, feet planted. No talking, no laughing, just waiting. His mouth went dry. He squeezed the dog's harness so tightly his knuckles whitened. "They're here for her," he croaked. The nurse didn't answer. She didn't have to. Word spread through the hospital in a hush. Staff peered through windows. Patients huddled at blinds. Even the ICU's tough old charge nurse blinked back sudden tears when she saw the lot filled with SEALs standing vigil. Doctors traded glances over clipboards. Even the security guard who'd first spotted them outside now stood respectfully by the entrance, nodding them in one by one if they wanted to wait in the lobby. Inside, they took up space in the corridors without saying a word. Some found a wall to lean against. Others sat in folding chairs dragged from conference rooms. A few stood straight, arms behind their backs, watchful. One old Master Chief in a battered ball cap walked up to the nurse's station. "She's still in surgery." "No, she's stable." "She's in ICU, but it's touch and go." He nodded. "Then we'll wait." And he did. They all did. The dog sensed something had shifted. It whined softly, tail thumping once, ears pressed forward. The veteran bent over and wrapped his arms around the animal's neck, pressing his forehead into its fur. "Look at them," he whispered, his voice cracked. The dog gave a low, contented growl in reply, almost as if it understood. The hospital had never seen anything like it. In pediatrics, a kid with a broken arm pressed his nose to the window and whispered, "Mom, who are they?" "They're soldiers," she answered quietly. "Why are they here?" She shook her head. "Psst. Because someone did something very brave." Inside, nurses kept moving, checking monitors, hanging for bags, but their eyes kept flicking to the men waiting silently. The tension in the air wasn't fear, but reverence. In the ICU, Mia lay pale and unconscious. Machines beeped in steady rhythms. Her breathing was ragged but regular, forced by the ventilator. Tubes snaked from her arms. Bandages wrapped her midsection. Angela sat at her side, eyes rimmed with red, gently brushing Mia's hair back from her forehead. "They're here for you," she whispered. She kept talking even though Mia couldn't answer. "They filled the whole parking lot. Just all these soldiers, SEALs, because you saved one of theirs. Because you didn't even think about it. You just stepped." In front of the knife, Angela sniffed hard, wiping at her face. They're not leaving. Not until they know you're okay. Outside, the SEALs kept coming. Some brought coffee for each other and set it down untouched. Others went to their knees to greet the old dog, ruffling its ears, scratching its neck. Dog wind, tail wagging, recognizing the scent of brothers in arms. One SEAL with a lined face crouched beside the veteran. "He was with us in Afghanistan," he said, voice low. The veteran nodded, unable to speak. "You did right by him," the SEAL added. Then he stood and returned to his silent watch. Shift changes happened. Nurses swapped in and out. Doctors updated charts, patients were moved, but the SEALs stayed. Refused to leave. When the ICU doors swung open for brief moments, they all looked up together, searching for the face of the girl they hadn't met, but had sworn to stand for. As the sun rose fully and the morning went on, the hospital's normal routines resumed. But nothing felt normal because outside the lot was full of men who knew exactly what sacrifice looked like. And they had shown up to repay it quietly with presence alone. And inside, Mia slept on fighting for her life.
Yes.
But she wasn't alone. Mia's eyelids twitched once, twice, then lifted with effort. A sharp, bright pain shot through her abdomen the moment she tried to move. She gasped, though even that was thin and raspy through the oxygen cannula taped to her face. Her vision swam, for a second, before sharpening. Bleach-white hospital ceiling. The rhythmic beep of monitors and 4 lines snaked from her arm. The bag above nearly empty, labeled with her blood type in bold red ink. She tried to speak but only managed a soft croak. Instantly, movement shapes shifted above her, resolving into faces she knew. Angela tear-streaked but smiling wide enough to break. Sam, eyes rimmed red, exhaling a relieved breath as if he'd been holding it for days. A doctor she barely recognized from the night shift nodded at her with controlled satisfaction. "She's awake," he said quietly, as though saying it. Too loud might undo the miracle. Mia blinked hard, confusion cutting through the fog. She tried to lift a hand but felt its weight like 1,000 bricks. It twitched feebly on the blanket. Angela caught it, held it tight, her thumb rubbing circles over Mia's scraped knuckles. "Hey there, hero," Angela whispered. "Hell out of us," Mia tried to answer. Her lips cracked painfully. Nothing came out but air. Her eyes darted, frantic for understanding. "Shh, don't talk yet," Sam said, voice thick. "You're safe. You made it." Her eyes watered. She felt her chest shudder with relief, and something like disbelief. She remembered flashes, cold air, the knife, the veteran's shout, the dog barking. Blood, so much blood, then nothing. "Vitals stable," the doctor murmured, watching the monitor. "She's fighting. Keep talking to her." Angela leaned in closer. "You did it, Mia. You're okay. We're right here." Mia's eyes moved around the room, straining past the blur of tears. She saw flowers stacked on the window ledge, crayon-drawn cards. From the Pez floor taped up around the glass door poles, beeping monitors, the low rumble of hospital machinery. But then she saw something else. Movement outside the window. She blinked hard, forcing her eyes to clear. Rows and rows of men stood on the hospital lawn, some in dress uniforms, others in worn jeans and battered jackets. Every one of them stock. Still shoulder, SEALs, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They weren't talking, they weren't laughing, they were just there watching, waiting for her. Mia's heart rate spiked on the monitor. A soft alarm went off. The doctor hushed it with a button press, nodding to the nurses to hold steady. Angela followed Mia's gaze, smiled despite the tears. "They've been here the whole time," she murmured, voice shaking. "Since the first night they didn't leave. Not once." Mia's eyes burned. "They heard what you did," Sam added. He swallowed hard. "That dog you saved? Served with them. He's one of theirs. So you are too." She felt a sob claw its way up, but it hurt too much to let it out. Instead, tears spilled from the corners of her eyes, running into her hairline. Her blurry gaze swung back to the bed's other side. And there he was, the veteran.
Eyes.
Older lines deep as scars, gray hair matted from days without sleep. He was seated in a Stiff hospital chair, his back hunched, hand locked around hers with the strength of a drowning man. His eyes were raw, shining with moisture. He didn't bother to hide. The dog sat at his feet, tail thumping gently against the floor as soon as her eyes found him. "Mia," the old man croaked, voice cracking in the middle. He bent lower, pressing his forehead to their joined hands. "Thank you, God. Thank you." She tried to answer but couldn't. Her lips trembled, her chest hitched painfully. "Thank you," he repeated over and over, as if the words were all he had left. His tears fell onto her blanket, darkening the pale hospital green. The dog whined once, long and low, as if echoing the old man's words. Angela squeezed Mia's shoulder gently. "Shh, you've saved them, Mia. Both of them. He hasn't left your side." "Neither. Has the dog?" Sam cleared his throat, wiping at his face with the heel of his palm. "None of them left. The seals. They said they wouldn't go until you woke up." Mia's eyes moved back to the window. The morning sun was creeping up now, lighting their faces in warm gold. She could see the solemn lines the way they all stood in formation, even though no one had ordered them to. Silent, waiting, she felt something crack inside her. Not a bone this time, but that icy wall she built around her heart after every failure, every patient she couldn't save. It shattered under the weight of gratitude so fierce it nearly broke her. She let out a sound, part sob, part laugh. It hurt like fire in her wounds, but she didn't care. Her eyes locked onto the old veteran's face, and though she couldn't speak, he seemed to hear her anyway. "I'd do it again." He nodded like he'd heard the words clear as day. "I know," he whispered back. "I know you would." A nurse gently adjusted her pillow, careful of the tubes and bandages. The doctor checked the monitors one last time, satisfied enough to step back and let the moment breathe. Angela brushed Mia's hair again. "You did it," she whispered. "You made it." Mia closed her eyes, exhausted beyond anything she'd known. But her hands stayed curled tight around the veterans, their grips locked as if to anchor them both. Outside, the seals stayed right where they were, a silent promise. They weren't going anywhere, and Mia finally let the tears come. Mia's recovery was no quick triumph. It was a slow, grueling battle that demanded everything she had left. The simplest tasks were nearly impossible. Sitting up felt like knives twisting in her side. Even breathing too deeply sent shocks of pain through her bandaged torso. Nurses turned her with practiced gentleness while she clenched her teeth, refusing to cry out. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and blooming get-well flowers sent by strangers and friends alike. But she wasn't alone. Every day, familiar faces arrived. Angela and Sam showed up before and after shifts, reading her funny notes from Mom. Coworkers, bringing terrible hospital jello so they could drink it together and complain about it. They refused to let her slip into despair, and there were others. The seals didn't disappear after that first long vigil. They organized shifts among themselves so that Mia was never without a visitor. Big men with calloused hands and weather-beaten faces would pull chairs up beside her bed and talk quietly, sometimes about nothing important at all. Some brought photos of their families. Some brought their own service dogs, who seemed to understand the seriousness of the visit, resting their heads on Mia's blanket. They called her sister without hesitation. They called her one of ours. A veteran who had sat at her bedside that terrible first day visited nearly every afternoon once she was out of ICU. He moved slowly, leaning on his cane, but his eyes were brighter. His canine never left his side, resting his great shaggy head on Mia's lap when she could sit up. He never stopped thanking her. It embarrassed her at first. "You don't have to keep saying it," she muttered one day, voice scratchy. "I do," he said, simply brushing at his eyes with the back of a gnarled hand. The hospital staff grew used to the parade of visitors. They learned to smile at the nodding men in faded unit ball caps, some who saluted quietly when they saw her awake. Meanwhile, bills piled up. Even with insurance, there were limits, exclusions, hidden fees. She tried not to think about it until the day the hospital administrator knocked gently on her door with an envelope in hand. Oh, was she? She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a certified check for $100,000 for your medical bills and anything else you need, the note read in a looping scroll. She felt dizzy. It turned out the Veterans Club, the men she'd seen gathering in groups in the hallway, talking in hushed, gruff voices, had started it. Donations had flooded in from all over the country. Old soldiers, Navy vets, strangers who heard about a nurse who'd stepped in front of a knife for one of their own. Angela found her crying in bed that day, the check crushed in her hand. "Deserve it," Angela said, voice fierce. "Don't you dare say you don't." But they weren't finished. When Mia could walk again slowly, carefully, she got a call to attend a meeting. She nearly refused, shy, still frail, but Angela threatened to drag her there herself, so Mia went. It was held in the back room of the local Veterans Hall, walls lined with flags and photos of men younger than they should have been. The air smelled of old wood and coffee. The place went quiet when she entered, not out of awkwardness, but respect. They offered her a chair at the front. The veteran she'd saved was there, sitting proudly, dog at his side. A man with steel gray hair and a chest full of ribbons stood up and cleared his throat. "Mia," he said, voice cracking just once, "we can't ever repay you, but we'd like to. Try. We want you to be our chief health officer. Help us organize care, check in on our guys, connect them to resources." Mia blinked hard. "I'm a nurse," she whispered. "Exactly," he said with a smile. She took the job. Slowly she built a new life around it. She scheduled clinics, helped organize mental health seminars, made sure the old guys who hated hospitals got their blood pressure checked anyway. She brought in volunteers. She'd taught CPR. She'd been good in the hospital. Here, she was necessary. She gave speeches at fundraisers, voice shaking at first, but steadying when she looked out and saw a row of men and women who'd faced worse and still showed up for each other. She told her story, not to brag, but to remind them of the truth. She'd nearly died to prove that loyalty wasn't some dusty idea in an old manual. It was alive. It meant showing up. It meant refusing to look away when someone was vulnerable. It meant risking yourself when you didn't have to. Her scars stayed with her, puckered and angry at first, then pale and ropey as the months went on. Sometimes in the mirror, they still startled her, but she didn't hide them. If anything, she treated them as badges. When asked about them by new volunteers, she'd just smile. "Cost of doing what was right," she'd say. The SEALs still visited. Even years later, they sent Christmas cards, called on her birthday, dropped by when they were in town. They called her family because she was... And Mia, who once thought family meant only the one you were born into, realized she'd built something wider, stronger. A family forged in gratitude, service, and shared sacrifice. Because she'd stepped in front of a knife because they'd refused to let her fall alone. In the end, that night outside the diner didn't just save one old man and his dog, it rippled outward. It healed things in her she hadn't even realized were broken. And when she stood in front of crowds telling them about the day she almost died, she didn't talk about fear or pain or anger. She talked about love, about loyalty, about what it meant to never ever leave someone behind. If you enjoyed Mia's story of courage, loyalty, and healing with Angela, Sam, and the veteran, please like, share, and subscribe. Drop your thoughts on how it all ended and rate the story on a scale of 10. Let us know where you are watching from. We would love to hear what you feel about this journey.